Hi, I'm Rabbi Zoot, and welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about TV for a minute. We're the day after the Super Bowl, so we got a lot of TV yesterday, both for the sports fans and the fans of commercials and all kinds of people who just enjoyed sitting around and watching the game yesterday. Television is one of the most interesting inventions in the 20th century, but I'm actually more interested in what's happening in the 21st century. Early on in the 21st century, television was all about cable. You wanted a cable package that offered hundreds of channels and all kinds of options, and you loved the diversity because you could see anything that interested you, and everybody wanted their own unique channel, and it got a little overwhelming. And finally, people started to say, why do I need 500 channels? Especially when I only watch 10 of them, maybe 15. Why do I need all this extra stuff? How do I trim the fat a little bit? And companies started to say, well, streaming is the future. So instead of paying for cable, maybe we'll do streaming services. And so you'll get Netflix, and that'll have all the television shows you need. Or you'll get Hulu, and it'll have everything in one place. Except all in one place wound up being a little bit of a problem. Because slowly over time, there were so many of these subscription services that you needed Netflix, and you needed Hulu, and you needed Disney Plus, and you needed HBO Max, and you needed Peacock, and all the other options. There was just so much. And so people started to say, what would happen in theory, if we put some of these streaming systems together? What happens if we brought them all into one place and let them coalesce a little bit so that I could pay one flat fee and have a couple of different options all bundled together? And that's where we started getting the streaming bundle. Now, I think we're still a few years away from this, but what do you call a streaming bundle when you have enough of things all wrapped up into one? The sneaky answer is you call it cable. Because we're just going through a cycle here. At first we had too many options, and we needed to trim the fat, and then we wanted a little less choice in the matter. We wanted it all bundled together so it was a little easier. And then we're going to wind up back in a very similar place with a little bit of a different goal. What does this have to do with the conversation we've been having? Well, last week we started engaging with what does institutional Judaism look like? What is the purpose of being involved in a synagogue or in a communal structure? And I would make the argument that over and over again throughout Jewish history, we've been asking this question, especially in the last 30 years. We've been asking, why do I need to belong to a synagogue? I could get the same values out of belonging to the JCC. Or I could have a chavaya group, a chavura group, a little group, a cross-section of people who all come together and get to have some of the benefits with a little more intimacy. Or we could have sort of an ad hoc basis. I can go a la carte to all these different places and get a little bit of that Jewish engagement without needing to pay one place for the bulk of my dues. It was an interesting conversation. It still is an interesting conversation. But what I might argue is at the end of the day, the best way to accomplish all of our goals for meaningful Jewish engagement is through the synagogue, is through communal spaces that are built on the principle of we come together, we pool our resources, and we share opportunities together so that we all might experience a rising tide that helps all ships. And that we as a community might all get that experience of helping one another, even if it's not the area we need. Another place where we talk about this is taxes. Right? We ask the question, why should I, as someone who doesn't have children yet, pay taxes that go towards school systems I won't use? Well, the same argument could be made for somebody else who says, I don't read books, I don't use library resources, why should I have to pay for that? And the bottom line is because we as a community need to discuss how we all invest in the things that will keep us all engaged, will make sure all of our needs are met, even if that means that I'm not necessarily donating my money to the thing I will use most often, but rather we as a whole will have all of our needs met because we're pooling our resources together. As we continue this conversation about what does it mean to bring Jewish space together and how do we construct the most beautiful idea of thoughtful Jewish space and thoughtful Jewish community, I want to ask you, what is it about communal life, congregational life, that hits the goals best? Because there's a lot of things we do really right. And what are some of the places where maybe congregational Judaism isn't hitting the ball out of the park? What are those places we need to update things, make sure we're hitting our target a little better? Because I would argue, and we'll continue the conversation in the coming weeks, but I'll argue that the thing we need to do is not get rid of the model, but we need to perfect the model. We need to say that financial engagement shouldn't be the barrier that prevents you from participating in community, but nor should you be able to not invest at all. Everyone should have a stake in the community, regardless of how much money you have, but the money should not be the reason you don't engage. Everyone should have the opportunity to learn in our space, whether you're 2 years old or 200 years old. And so we have to create an opportunity where learning is diverse, learning is offered in a multiplicity of formats, and we get the chance to do this work in any way that any person who's investing says, I can see myself reflected in my community. We have to do better, but I don't think we should stop doing. Streaming services looked like they killed cable. And at the end of the day, we're seeing people want to engage in content consumption that is meaningful, that is accessible, and that brings them some form of joy and fulfillment. Judaism is no different. People want to come to spaces where they feel like they're being seen and cared for, where they feel like their needs are being met, and where they feel like their bang for their buck is most efficient. I believe we can do that in Jewish space, and I believe we can do it well. And so part of what we're going to talk about as we keep going through this journey is how do we make sure that our efforts are most accurate and most efficient without cutting off our nose to spite our face. Thank you so much for joining me. Make sure you leave comments below with all of your ideas about how do we do this better? How do we make our conversation about communal life all the more effective? And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks so much. Have a good day.